everybody. Thanks for joining today's panel on supply chain trends, challenges, and innovations in the CPG space, hosted by EthAum Partners and Simplr Solutions. This is Madhu Gupta, Head of Sales and Marketing at EthAum. Just to give you a brief overview, EthAum is a deep tech revenue accelerator based in Singapore. We are fortunate enough to have 70 plus startups in our portfolio and to receive support from the likes of Enterprise Singapore, Cyberport Hong Kong, Microsoft, AWS, Oracle, Twilio, Rackspace, and many more. Simplr and EthAum are thrilled to host this panel since it gives us a fantastic opportunity to connect with the supply chain leaders, learn from their insights, and build a fabulous community of subject matter experts. Simplr is one of the portfolio startups of EthAum, which is disrupting the supply chain ecosystem for the leading CPG companies in the Asia Pacific. Ramas, founder of Simplr, will be moderating today's event. He will do a brief introduction of Simplr and ask some truly intriguing questions to our esteemed panelists. I'm sure our panelists will love comments and questions from the audience as well. Please use chat section. Now, I'll request Ramas to go ahead and take the event forward. I hope you enjoyed today's insightful discussion.
So that was a high-octane welcome from Madhu and Ramas. Please go ahead with the introduction of Simplr.
Yeah, thanks, Pankaj. Thanks, Madhu, for the introduction. I will just quickly share a small thing about Simplr, a brief of what we do. To see.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. My name is Ramas. I co-founded Simplr. I have my colleague Ram. He's another co-founder. Ram, can you just introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, sure. I'm Ram Anand. I'm co-founder and CEO of Simplr. I'm having 25 years of experience in providing mobility solutions to enterprises.
Thanks, Ram. Simplr, we using intuitive mobility solutions, we kind of make for the multi-channel distribution companies to get an overall visibility and they can optimize their supply chain. Our target segments has been distribution intensive industries like CPG, FMCG, pharma, logistics fulfillment, and e-commerce, logistics service providers actually. So our solution offering, we have a distribution management solution, which consists of a multi-channel order management where the orders from physical channels and digital channels can be taken. So you kind of get an overall visibility to do a fulfillment efficiently. Then we have the Salesforce enablement where it helps you to enable the pre-sales team, van sales, merchandising, and vending machine distributors. So we have a distributor management where all these companies have maybe 5 to 10 level of distributors, maybe a 20 or 30 depending on the geography. So using our distribution management solution, the whole distribution network becomes like a one entity. So as a principal, they can get a visibility at a very granular level, even to the lowest level of distributor, what their sales team is doing in terms of fulfillment and activity. So they can get all the information which helps them to optimize the whole supply chain. So we also have a warehouse automation and last mile delivery. This can be used along with the distribution management solution, and some of our customers use it. And also the warehouse automation can be used standalone. Maybe companies who are manufacturing companies or trading companies without a large distribution network, they still use our solution actually. So we have got 100 plus deployment. We are present in 5 countries, and from a go-to-market, we work through partners as well as direct. So we have our presence in Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand. Now with companies like Sivantas, it's an audio device medical company. So we are kind of rolling out in Poland in North America, and even Perfetti, Vanmele. We started with Philippines, we are going to Bangladesh, and it's kind of going global actually. So see, these are some of the customers in FMCG, CPG, and some of the manufacturing distribution companies. So this is a quick introduction. Thanks. So I would request all the panelists to do a brief introduction of themselves, maybe 30 to 45 seconds actually. So Mark, can you start with you?
Oh, sure, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, to all the ladies on the call, Happy Women's Week. Just thought I'd share that with everyone. My name is Mark Patel. I'm COO and Deputy CEO of SCF Group. I've been in logistics, supply chain, and freight forwarding industry for 34 years, working with the likes of MSAS, XL, DHL, OHL, and Geodis. And I'm very happy to be here to learn from everyone else on the panel, all the questions.
Thanks, Mark. Maybe next to Michael.
Hi, everyone. So I'm based out of Singapore. I've been here 12 years now in Asia, and I lead the supply chain consulting team for JLL. So JLL is a real estate company. We, under our sector, logistics and industrial, we help clients identify logistics real estate. And my team, we actually help do a supply chain study as part of that end-to-end solution. Thank you, and happy to be here today.
Thanks, Michael. Next, Priti.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Priti. I'm responsible for supply chain business technology for Asia Pac in Johnson & Johnson. My current focus is in the, I look across all the four divisions of Johnson & Johnson, which is pharmaceutical, consumer, medical, and vision. But my current focus is customer experience, logistics, and distribution. So been in Singapore since 20 plus years. Very happy and looking forward to a great discussion today.
Thanks, Priti. Has Sushil joined? Or Sushil is...
I don't see Sushil yet.
Okay. So maybe Ron?
Hi, very good afternoon from KL. My name is Ron. I'm the head of BD and Strategic Alliances from Axiata Digital Group. Basically, today I'm really honored, right? Because we are working very closely with Simplr to look into how we can potentially enable the micro and small enterprises into supply chain financing. I spent my last 15 years in telecommunication industry, and obviously I was leading a FMCG company in the last 4 years. We are pretty much a boutique supply chain specialist. So we do last mile fulfillment, and we were one of the business users for solution like how Simplr is offering to everybody. So happy to be here. Hopefully we can learn and grow together. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. So maybe we will probably start going to the questions actually. Maybe I'll just flash quickly this thing. So I think the first question is, what are the biggest challenges the supply chain leaders from the CPG industries are facing? Probably, maybe we start with Priti.
Sure. So I think in my view, I would call out two. Of course, I think when it comes to challenges, we are never at the dearth of it, but two big ones that come to my mind. First one would be connected real-time visibility is what I want to call out, and communication is also a big part of it. And what I mean by that is really how effectively and efficiently does the supply chain connect right from when a product is shipped from where it is produced to where it is consumed. And having that connected visibility across each node is become even more critical in today's time, but it's also challenging, right? So easier said that we would want to have that kind of a real-time visibility. And I believe it's a topic in itself, but I do want to call that out, that this is something I believe is the need of the hour, and also one of the biggest challenges I do see that the CPG companies are facing, that how do we enable that capability? And it's again a combination of data, processes, and technology. The other one I'll call out is, which goes closer to the consumer, is what I would say that given the different omni-channel that we have and the online to offline, how well a CPG as a company are we able to sense that demand is what I would consider as the second big challenge. And that's mainly because, the consumer demand has radically changed over the years with different channels out there. So yeah, I think these two are really big ticket items in terms of challenges that the CPG industry is facing today.
I think the interesting perspective. I think I come to the second part you answered. I think supply chain companies, that has always been a struggle where how the consumers are consuming what kind of consumer demographics in it. It could be a traditional or modern this thing. How well you are able to kind of get now? Are you getting more information than you were 5 years back from the consumer? How they consume the thing, like what kind of demographics consume the CPG items like?
So I'll give a quick perspective. There is, again, we are definitely out from the traditional model of doing the demand forecasting and looking historical, right? And that does not exist anymore. So in terms of how we are doing it, yes, data is available, but the point is that how are we really actioning, looking at the data, coming out with meaningful insights, and then using that to cater to what that needs of the customer is. And that's where this demand sensing is. So there are two parts of it, right? How are we effectively sensing the demand? And second is how well our upstream supply chain is being able to cater against that demand. So I would say, yes, are we getting more information? To answer your question, yes, we are. Definitely getting more information. There are much more avenues in terms of technology. We're having point of sales. We're going into tertiary levels of getting data. It then goes back that how do we channel the plethora of data that is easily available today in a much more meaningful manner with a very clear action. And that's where I think, I don't think everybody's got their, I would say, it's all not all sorted. So I think some people are, much advanced on the learning curve as against some others. Hope that answers the question, Ramas.
Thanks, Priti. It's a good perspective. So, Michael, what is your view on the challenges that supply chain leaders from the CPG space are facing?
Yeah, sure. So I guess from our clients and our client discussions and some of the projects we are doing, the biggest challenge we see now is the omni-channel, is e-commerce, and how do you deliver through these kind of more complicated and sometimes more costly channels. So we see companies, for example, in China, where they have to deal with a lot of third-party providers. So they have traditionally all their 3PL and CPG companies in Asia, especially where they don't have a big, let's say, footprint, they prefer to go through third parties. So already they have the 3PLs historically, but now they have third parties to manage their marketplaces. So if they sell through Alibaba or JD.com, so that creates a new layer of complexity on how do you manage your inventory, how do you manage your logistics real estate footprint as well. So whether you want to invest or not, and this is where I feel there's a lot of room for innovation and a lot of room for kind of technology to come in.
Thanks, Michael. Mark, your perspective?
I agree with both of the challenges raised by Priti and Michael. From our side, the supply chain is broken. So if you look at global trade, 80% of global trade goes through ocean freight. Now, with the ocean freight rates going up, all of the supply chain leaders are now having to start thinking different ways of serving their clients. You couple that with the increase in e-commerce. So 2021 alone, I think e-commerce grew by 19.920%. And for the next 5 years is expected to grow at a CAGR rate of about 11 to 12%. So on one side, you've got growth of consumer demand in the way they like to receive their products. On the other side, what used to be a stable, reliable supply chain in the ocean freight is now broken. And with the price hikes, with inflation going up, I think from my perspective, and I've seen many cycles, and back in the day, we used to talk about just-in-time stock delivery at the various warehouses or distribution places or retail centers. I think now you will start to see more just in case. So you have the information of the demand, and rather than sort of time your supply chain to get that stock to just in time, you're going to have extra stock in your wherever your distribution, however your distribution network's working, just so that you're not losing that client. Not forgetting there's a lot of competition to get those clients. So if you don't serve the client online the way they want it to be served, it's all about customer experience, and they're going to go to someone else, and it's very difficult to get that client back.
Oh, fantastic. Ron, your perspective?
Yeah, hi. Well, basically, if we were to look at the challenges, obviously there are long lists for us to discuss, right? And I totally agree with what that the panelists here just mentioned, but I'll look at it from very much the downstream supply chain fulfillment house, and how do we look at pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, right? So one thing is pretty constant. I mean, despite all the market dynamic changes, all the disruption in terms of ocean or air freights, I guess one thing that is constantly haunting most of the distribution network is always about the supply chain financing, right? Which we realize that we need a lot of working capital when it comes to any of the fulfillment, any of the distribution in terms of optimizing demand and supply chain financing. And at the same time, I think a lot of retail also struggle in terms of looking into actionable insights. How do we do forecasting when there's always some panic buy, and also there's always some extraordinary demand surge, or even supply shortages. So I think actionable insights is something that all of us constantly look at least from the Malaysian distribution context. So I guess having a solid system, internal or even from the macro level point of view, if we were to able to establish some solid database or solid market intel, that will help especially the distribution ecosystem, right? For a better planning, and also when it comes to financing, that will be much optimized. So I think that's very much coming from a boutique supply chain angle, right?
Okay, thanks, Ram. Thanks for your good perspective. So I would probably move to the next question, which is an interesting part. So what is the one innovation in CPG supply chain solutions you are excited about? Maybe again, Priti, we start with you.
Sure. Again, very good question. A lot of innovations that would come to the mind, but I'll probably connect it back to what I started off in the previous question, right? So one of the innovation in that space, which I feel pretty personally excited about, and I feel that that's also carving the future, is touchless supply chain, right? Wherein what we are looking at enabling is how can we. So if you recall, we always used to find out that, what would be that one platform that's going to, solve all the problems that we have, or enable that end-to-end connectivity. Soon to realize that, it's a Herculean effort if we are looking at a single platform, which is going to provide that end-to-end visibility. It's not happening, right? Because call it that, it's the legacy that huge companies are holding off with, that, they have disparate systems, and yet trying to get to being able to have that end-to-end visibility. How can it be done innovatively? And that's where this touchless supply chain comes in. So I would say using smart APIs, which can easily talk to various disparate systems to provide that overarching end-to-end visibility, is something that we have embarked the journey on. And I feel that's really one of the innovations that I would call out, right? And I think just a quick call there is it's not just technology or linking through APIs, but I've seen that third-party logistic providers, freight forwarders, they've also gone into that collaborative partnering, which I feel has really enhanced that innovation to the next level, right? So it's not just saying that how does it impact or improve an individual company's performance, but having that external partnership to up the game on collaboration, I think is innovation in itself. So yeah.
Fantastic. I think, as you rightly mentioned, I think technology is probably not a big limitation. When you're talking about the different stakeholders, even the harmonization of the data is important so that the APIs work perfectly, right? Because what is your perspective like the challenges you face harmonizing between the different parties actually?
So sorry, did you ask me that question, Ramas? Just
Yeah.
I'm not speaking for somebody else. Okay. Yeah. So I think that data is a big it's a big factor, right? And it is a make or break, right? So if you don't have the right data, no matter what I spoke, it's not going to work. So I would say it really depends for us. It was a journey when we started off a few years ago, but I think we've reached a stage where hand on heart, I think the data is fairly good when it comes to, because again, there are three elements, right? It's the accuracy, it's the availability, and it's the completeness. And we've got to tick all the boxes to say that it's usable data. So I would say that, again, with internal data, yes, it's a little bit easier. When it comes to having that same integrated data with external partners, it takes a little longer in order to get to that baseline level of data. So it's quite broad, but the way I'm answering is that probably internal data, we have better control. If you ask me, how are we in our company? I would say after having a very clear data, data as a foundational readiness called out as part of the strategy, I think, we are in a very good shape right now. External data is something that I would say is still a bit of challenge, right? Because you've got to make sure that both elements are ticked off.
Yeah, thanks, Priti. Great perspective. Mark, what is your view? Which innovation is there about?
I think there are a few things. First of all, I'm one of the few people on this call that remember punch cards and paper tape. And so I've gone through the cycle of the punch card, paper tape, then the green on black technology to where we are now. So in terms of technological advancement, and specifically in the industry that I operate in, logistics, supply chain, freight forwarding, exciting times ahead. And I agree with Priti. I think you now have instances where information is entered once and once only, but used many times across the supply chain because of the collaborative nature of different parties coming into the game, if you like. There are systems now that are connected with the airlines, connected with the ocean lines, and the age-old challenge of visibility still exists. There are many players out in the market which tell you, we provide real-time visibility, but as a practitioner, I can tell you the visibility can be real-time only at the speed with which the guy, he or she, captures that event at that point of execution. So if that event is not captured, that visibility is not going to be captured. So big issue, if you talk about some of the challenges, when the Suez Canal thing happened, that again, if people had visibility, I mean, what do you do? You got that visibility, but what do you do? I mean, the issue is you still need supply chain leaders to then think of a different process. We go air freight from Asia to a place in Europe, and then subsequently we do ocean freight, and then we still deliver the product. So there are those areas. But from a sharp end, there's some of the challenging, some of the exciting stuff that's going on, I think. And I was talking about this with a dear friend a few days ago, is the contactless payment. And if you go to places like Decathlon, if you're in Singapore, you put your stuff in the basket, and all of a sudden it says, right, you've got 5 items in a basket, your bill is $100. Fantastic. I mean, who would have thought 3 years ago that we would be in that position? But you've got to bear in mind that technology, a lot of these technologies born out of the fact that we've had COVID. for the last few years. So we've had to evolve to a contactless technology, so it's safer for the client and also safer for the employee within those environments, and which is all good, and that's just one of the examples.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think yes, COVID has kind of accelerated adoption of technology in a big way. Definitely, there is a blessing in disguise.
Maybe.
Yeah, Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah. So look, on my end, I mean, what I see with clients in Asia, which they're running warehouses, when I talk about automation, talk about this kind of tech, I think one of the challenges that people sometimes doesn't come first. So how do the operators really make the most out of technology? And a lot of the times they need to actually get the fundamentals right, which is a WMS system really, and maybe a conveyor belt. So an RF gun. So I see definitely various levels of maturity, and when you come to tech and automation, you need to make sure the change management is there, with the data team on the ground. So yeah, it's I think it's a kind of a long journey. Of course, some companies are very mature and they can pick up innovation quite fast and they can deploy it and implement it. But I see the majority of companies across Asia don't have that yet.
But have you seen any innovation which you get excited about? Anybody adopting it?
I guess as most people, when you see those e-commerce warehouses and all the AMRs going up and down, and AutoStore and all these kind of technology, all of these are really amazing. Of course, even in Singapore, you see ASRS systems which are not really fully utilized. So it's it's easy to see the examples of some of these tech solutions, but there's also quite a big risk. Now, of course, there are solutions which are quite, I would say, low investment, low risk, that you can try and you can expand, and that's where some of the technologies like Geek Plus are trying, right, to start small or do it as a service. So I think that's a good option.
Thanks, Michael. I think it's a good point. I think today ARS kind of thing was only affordable for big companies, but I think now technology has kind of, even robotics has become kind of commoditized, where the investment could be done even for small companies, right? That's something great about the technology. Ron, to you.
Yes, hi. So I came from the environment that predominantly most of the wholesalers or distributors are still relying pretty much on pen and paper, right? When come to order taking, when come to collection, issuing credit notes, all these are pretty much very much manual, right? So I think over the last 2 years, with some of the partners or some of the solution provider that I work closely with, we see a lot of adoption into the digital way of doing business. They start to get, obviously because of the lockdown, the salesperson, the merchandiser, they are not supposed to go report to the office, and they are supposed to work on their Salesforce automation. They are started to engage everything digitally. They start to use Zoom or the kind of virtual meetings, right? So I think that's really some work to me is really a good thing that happened over the pandemic, that in a way it expedite the entire digital adoption. And I think Mark just mentioned about all the contactless transaction, the payment that we are working with some of the partners that even looking at how potentially B2B payment is happen, contactlessly rather than looking to still issuing a check or still doing all the payment transfer or even cash collection, right? So I think there are a lot of fundamental, a lot of basic changes. It may mean very normal to some part of the economy, but I think at least in Malaysian context, in some part of the segments, I think that really something that I'm happy to witness the change of the digital adoption. Yeah.
Thanks, Ron. It's a good perspective. Maybe I'll move to the next question. Like how pandemic has changed the trajectory of supply chain innovations and priorities for the supply chain leaders. Maybe Mark, you can go first.
Sure. I think first of all, we need to recognize that the pandemic has obviously accelerated the innovation. That's without doubt in all facets of industry, whichever industry you're in, innovation has changed it. Now, the challenge there is this. You've got the technology rates increasing at this rate, but the decision makers in supply chain, their adoption or acceptability of that technology is lagging behind. And you will always, and that's the challenge at the moment. There's a lot of good tech out there to be utilized within the supply chain. But the challenge is the right people, getting to the right people having to make the decision in order to adopt those supply chains. But if you look at the trajectory and the change in supply chain with the big issues around transportation and the workforce disruption, so that's obviously accelerated all of the different types of innovation in different areas, so that it's making work life safer. It's sort of ensuring that you are now more greener because this is the way everyone's moving towards. I mean, I personally believe we will get to a point where we will have our own individual carbon footprint based on what we buy. All the data is available. So what that also means is that the companies that supply those goods will have more information to provide that even more targeted information and to your sort of mobile devices and laptops and emails, etc., in order to sort of get your business. But this is where we're heading to. And I guess from a supply chain perspective, the innovation has to be, how do you become more agile? Now, back in the day, people were able to, as Priti mentioned earlier, you could sort of have your planning forecast all set, but that's not good enough anymore. You need to change the other way. So you need, from months and years of planning, you now effectively gone to weeks and days and weeks and months rather than years. So that whole trajectory is changing the way you do things, the way you deliver that product to the end customer.
Thanks, Mark. I think agility is the key now. Yes. So, Priti, what's your perspective?
Sure. I think from my perspective, what I have actually seen, especially when it comes to leadership, I would say leadership discussion, is that after this pandemic, the whole debate of why has been cut short, right? And people have figured that the hard way, but I would say that the debate on why is gone, and there's an increased focus on what do we do and how can we do, right? And that was, I think, one of the bright stars of everything that's not going right around us. And that doesn't take away the fact that, while it needs to be done, the speed and agility, and I think Mark mentioned this earlier as well, right? So speed and agility are still key. And I agree with your earlier comments, Ramas, that cost is still a factor, but technology cost has come down significantly, right? So what could have been like not affordable a few years ago has become like, very easy for most of the companies, not just big, but medium size or below companies also. The adoption has really sped up. So I think I've seen that significantly change over the last 2 years because of pandemic.
Thanks, Priti. Ron, what is your perspective?
Well, I guess this question I touched a little bit earlier, right? So again, I think it's all about the digitalization adoption and also autonomous, right? I think pandemic has actually make everybody relook and rethink about the entire market dynamics, especially on the supply chain. I mean, all this while we've been thinking that it has to be done through manual or even to to all this offline method. But now it is proven that there are a lot of things can be done digitally. So I guess a lot of challenges coming from the talent pool, a lot of learning, and it's a steep learning curve to everybody. But I think everyone is learning slowly and steadily. Most importantly, I guess, is the autonomous, and it's also the insights that we are able to equip with everybody. We don't have to meet face to face anymore. We don't really have to, meet in person, but we are able to do a lot of things remotely. So I think that really disrupt the entire typical or traditional logistic or supply chain, even the last mile fulfillment segment that we're looking at today.
Yep. Thanks, Ron. Michael?
Well, I mean, what we've seen changing is definitely a greater demand for logistics, real estate. So as inventory is piling up, right? I think Mark mentioned it. We're going to just in case models. So companies were, and I was talking with another CPG company. They went through a merger. They acquired a company just before the pandemic. And of course, when you merge, you have a lot of opportunities to consolidate logistics space. But they decided not to. They decided to keep, as much logistics space as they could, as much as inventory as they could. So, I mean, what we see is that, and I know Priti, I know what's J&J's strategy is, but we're looking at a bit more conservative model, so not very cost driven, but ensuring kind of resilience and service levels. So that's has changed a bit the agenda for leaders.
Yep. Thanks, Michael. That's a great perspective. Let me move to the next question. What about, we've been talking about the technology, and there is a lot of buzz on AI, ML. I think I would say it's a bit of commoditized, I would say, the computer vision, augmented reality, and blockchain. How these technologies are disrupting the supply chain space in your perspective, actually. So maybe I think we can start with maybe Michael. You can start first.
Yeah, sure. So look, blockchain is it's been going on for quite a few years now, and you could say that the only application for blockchain is Bitcoin. The most really, I haven't seen much really out there that's more than a pilot. Back at EY, I was working for Ernst & Young. We did a sort of pilot project for an Italian wine company. So we did through blockchain track the supply chain for the bottled wines you get, right. So making sure you get you get that traceability in and is verifiable. But the challenge, as always, is right that if someone stole that bottle and put a different kind of wine inside, who knows, right? So the business case I see a lot of the times for blockchain, it might not be there. So the effort required for this kind of technology versus some kind of centralized database where you have third parties verifying the data and verifying the parties as well. So that's something. I'm not an expert, but from my experience, I haven't seen much. And again, the other technology is all about data, and it's all about how much historical data you have to do it. And I think my understanding is basically it's machine learning, right? So you have to have that data set to work on. Otherwise, nobody could forecast the COVID pandemic, right? Regardless how much AI power you have.
Great. Mark, what's your perspective? You are seeing technologies.
Agreeing with Michael on that, but from our logistics and logistics freight forwarding perspective, AI has really accelerated in that area. And that, if you look at a typical logistics freight forwarding environment, say freight forwarding environment, where you handle a lot of documentation, you get an email, you book a shipment from point A to point B. There's a series of documentation that go with it. And what's happening now in this space, you are getting AI involved. You're getting bots that actually do all the shipments for you. They are connected to the right sort of freight forwarding software, and then therefore that goes through. Now, this is an attraction in the logistics environment at the moment because many people are looking to reduce their back office costs. So this is happening. This is growing. I mean, just quote some statistics. IDC predicts global market in the AI to reach $500 billion by 2024. And in Q1 2020, the global funding for AI was increased to 8.5 billion. So there's a lot of traction in this area. People are coming up with new ways of doing things, but there is also a cost. And sadly, there is the human cost. And what's happening is as you introduce technologies into traditionally human, or I guess human resource heavy functions, you need to find a solution as to what do you do with those people. And that's going to be a big issue, I think, in the next few years, is you're going to have a workforce that only know how to do certain things, and all of a sudden they've been replaced by machines. And what else can they do? You're not going to educate someone who's 45, 50, who's been in the business 25 years to say, oh, by the way, this is new technology, and you now have to sort of learn this, and this is going to get you this, you know. And sadly, that's going to be the human cost. And as a industry, we need to think long and hard as to how we balance that equation, and that's going to be the challenge. That's my view.
I agree with you. Maybe it should not be a replacement. It should complement them so they can do more. So it kind of balances the human angle also, actually. Yeah. Priti, your perspective and J&J?
Sure. I mean, totally agree with all the previous comments, right? And I feel that AI, machine learning is we are getting towards almost it's a foundational ask, right? So it's not something that's new anymore. And just also taking this opportunity to answer some of the questions in the chat which are related is also that, we spoke about earlier that demand sensing is an area where AI ML is like, it's an absolute win, because we've moved out from the traditional time series kind of models where we are looking at moving average or exponential smoothing. But AI ML, and there are many models out there, but depending upon what is the type of data, what is the market, what does it what data is talking about, I think huge relevance of AI ML there. So in J&J, of course, we use different models like, be it Prophet, DeepAR, we use also AutoArima. I mean, these are some very well-known ones, but then, again, depending on the data, it could be different. On the computer vision, I also feel that, it's also got good traction in terms of on-shelf availability. We are looking at different IoT, use of IoT when we talk about the real-time visibility in the CPG industry. On-shelf availability, again, is a key part, especially in CPG, right? In order to have those right triggers for supply. So very well used there. I would say VR and blockchain, particularly at least in my area, I'm seeing that I would say it's much more nascent. We've used AR and VR mainly in terms of doing, say, remote maintenance or doing some training kind of applications, right? We have used VR, AR, and blockchain haven't explored as much. So that's something we'd love to see how the industry shapes up in CPG. But yeah.
Thanks, Priti. Michael, from your logistics sector.
Yeah, so I mean, those technologies, I mean, I haven't really used obviously those technologies, DHL, and especially in Europe, they use a lot of those augmented reality technologies. And if you go here at their innovation center in Singapore, you can see a lot of these. Again, it's all about a business case, right? And whether there's a business case for the other technology versus the investment. and the risk. So yeah, definitely there are a lot of technologies out there that can be leveraged by users of warehouses.
Thanks, Michael. Maybe for want of time, maybe Ron, I'll skip you for this question. Maybe I'll go to the next. I think, yeah, we talked about innovations. What are the hurdles faced in adopting these innovations in your supply chain sector? I think Mark did touch about on that point when you started, where, Michael, we can start with you.
Yeah, I mean, there are hurdles. I think that's kind of what I mentioned before. So the hurdle around getting kind of the people to be able to be part of that transformation for any kind of innovation, and not be just a pilot you start off, but then kind of you don't continue. And I'm talking about innovation, really new stuff, right? So a lot of the things we see in warehouses are there for like decades. They're not really new. So I think that's the main hurdle I see. Some countries, like Singapore, the government also support technology, support whatever brings Singapore to the next century, right? So there's support from governments as well. So if you have that, it's great to leverage it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Singapore government has been doing a great part in supporting the SMEs to adopt technologies so they can kind of become global easily, right? Ron, next, what's your perspective?
Well, just to echo from what Michael just mentioned, right? I think obviously human capital or talent pool is one of the greatest challenges. I think typically, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, supply chain or any of the logistic wouldn't seem as the sexy industry or a job nature to work for, right, or work in, right? So I guess most of the youngsters today they'll say they want to go into a fintech, or they want to go into some of the sexier gaming industry, right? So rather than supply chain, so I think typically most of the supply chain, as a whole, is always about how do we get the right person at the right place at the right time, doing the right job, right? And obviously the know-how in terms of, as what Mark just mentioned, they are very seasoned and experienced workforce that have been running the business in the last 20, 25 years. But obviously when talk about any kind of digital innovation, that's something new to them. And obviously the younger generation may do a better job in terms of digital. So there's always a mismatch in terms of the talent pool, and there's always a gap that, as what Michael mentioned, the government is putting really hard, to make it work, right? So another thing that I think constantly is haunting all of us here, right, is always about the investment required when it comes to innovation, and in most of the time, there's not much of solid case studies or success case in terms of coming up with a clear formula to look into ROI. So most of the decision maker in supply chain, they always constantly question, right? And perhaps they are more willing to invest into nice luxury car than invest into some robust innovation in terms of digital adoption, so that they can they can show off to their friends and to hey, this is my latest gadget, my latest toy, but they wouldn't show them that, hey, this is the latest Salesforce automation that I just invested, right? So I guess it's again another mindset change to a lot of entrepreneurs out there. And also, I think there are a lot of awareness that everybody here we have to put in, right, to make everyone understood that that something is not meant for short term, but is in the longer term that you definitely bear the fruits.
Yeah, and just to add on that, on the investment, right? I mean, what we see is you have your tenant and your landlord, and especially if you have tech or innovation around the infrastructure, is who pays for that. So a lot of that cool stuff we see, right, needs 5G connection, needs a lot of, if you want to have electric vehicles, you need to have charging points, you need to have, if you want to be ESG, you have to track your energy consumption and all these things, right? So that's another question as well that we often encounter, is that If it's if it's a 3PL, most of the time it's just leases the warehouse. So how do you manage that? How do you convince all parties to contribute for this improvement?
Yeah.
Thanks, Patel. Mark?
Well, first of all, Ron, thank you for mentioning the sexiness or not of the logistics industry.
I was going to say, now in the last 2 years, it's probably going up the sexy rank.
So, and Ron is absolutely right. The fintech finance industry has always been the upper echelons of people coming out of university wanting to go there because it's perceived sexier. And I think with innovation and technology in the supply chain industry, there's actually got logistics back on the playing field with the fintech and the finance people. Not quite there yet, Ron, but we're working our way up. So you mentioned hurdles in adoption of innovation solution. And I think we need to look at, you may have the right solution for the right problem. In my experience, the issue has always been who you pitch the solution to. If you pitch the solution to the IT person or the person whose job may be on the line, chances are that solution is not going to go up to the CFO, the CEO, or the COO. So the first thing you need to do, and this is a challenge, because the moment you say, I've got a solution, it's IT in nature, the first thing any company will say, go talk to my IT director, my CTO, CIO, whoever else it is who's running IT. And this is a big issue. And once you get around that hurdle, then you need to go to the next phase, which is demonstrate the solutions creating value. Because if you're just replacing the current solution with a new, slightly sexier version, chances are for a 10 or 15% increase in value, most people are not going to disrupt their own internal way of doing things just to get that 10 or 15%. So you need to have that, the value. And where some of the challenges lie on the solution space, on the hurdles, is that people do not sufficiently have done their homework and enough domain knowledge. So you might be addressing a portion of the problem, but not the whole problem. And speaking from a logistics supply chain perspective, no two freight forwarding or logistics companies are the same. Just like the big guys. No, so when you go to them with a solution, you've got to understand their culture, how they're structured, their organization structure, how their P&L works, because that's a key thing. Because if your P&L is by division instead of country, then the decision-making process is totally different, and that would then have a huge hurdle on whether they adopt a new solution or not.
Thanks, Mark. I think always when we go to IT says everything is fine. You don't need anything. Everything is working fine. Priti?
Yeah, so I'll start with that. I'm from IT, but I don't always say that everything is fine, right? So no, very, very good comments, and thanks, Mark and Ron, for raising that. I want to make a quick comment on that, is that, while the ask is that we should be agile, I think that leaders have to bring in that agility in the mindset first, right? For the innovations to thrive. I think we are talking about agility in all the execution, but our traditional practices of looking at investments, ROI, the traditional way does not work if we've got to make innovation work. So that whole agility has to be in mindset and also in the ways of working, that we'll figure out the benefits as long as we are directionally and strategically aligned. And I think that's one of the key elements, better said than done. So yeah, that's the only thing I'd like to, add to that.
I agree with you in innovation, even in the customer side. There is always a failure is possible, right? But somewhere you need to try, otherwise nothing moves actually, because it's like venture capitalist funding. In the spending also, there is a little bit of experiments has to be done, which gives success. Thanks. I think also we are reaching the time. Last question, I think there are lots of startups in the ecosystem also. Just one quick one. What startups do something wrong when you pitch to you or your stakeholders? It could be a good learning for all the startups actually. What they should not do actually. Anybody can start. Maybe Mark, you can just.
Sure. I wrote down 5 points that I think startups should think about. First of all, don't underestimate value of a good partner. So you need to find a partner who share a vision, who share the same vision of your product that you can start with, because that gives you the first start. Secondly, and most importantly, in any business, don't underestimate cash flow, because as a startup, the cash you have is going to deplete very quickly. So you need to be very candid in the way you deploy that cash flow, how you do it, where you do it, and especially the marketing aspect of it. Domain knowledge, we talked about domain knowledge. One of the other things outside of domain knowledge is the solution has to sort of do more than just one country, one geography, one area for you to be successful. And finally, don't underestimate your competition, because they're all out there and they might be funded, they'll be bigger, better, stronger than you. So you either move fast, or, my ex-boss used to say, you're either moving forward or you're moving backward. You can't stand still. Simple as that.
I agree with you. Priti?
Yeah, I think Mark did raise up the point of scale up. So I'm just going to give one add-on where I feel that, I've seen that we struggle is great ideas when it comes to standalone ideas, right? But when it goes into integration, how is it going to work integrated at an operational level? I think that's where the struggle is. And I call out both two are different. So one is how well can it integrate with the legacy environment? And the second point is to say that operational challenges, because, if startups can simulate that in a real operationally challenging environment and make it work, I think that will go a long way. So I'll just call out two add-ons.
Fantastic. Michael?
Yes, I guess maybe to bring an example, we have a startup that we invested in, and I think one of the challenges is how do you avoid kind of overlap of services? So when the other startup as well, they are developing capabilities that we as JLL already have. How do you actually manage that, and how do you avoid kind of friction and kind of any other kind of the disruption in the relations between the startup and the investor? So I think that's one key learning I have.
Thanks, Michael. I think it has been fantastic. I think there's a lot of learning from the panelists, and I think each of them come from a different perspective also. That was kind of useful, actually. I take the opportunity. Thank you again for your valuable time. Yeah, Pankaj?
No, just want to thank everybody, especially to the panelists for the insightful discussions. And I see a lot of questions on the chat as well. Probably audience would love to connect with you, with Simplr, with EthAum, and talk about supply chain innovation and things of that nature. We would be extremely happy to connect with you and have more discussion. I just would like to launch this brief poll on your screen so that you can just look at the question. Are you interested in connecting with Simplr and learning more about their distribution management or warehouse management solution? Please say yes or no, and we will connect with you later so you can find more opportunities and work together. Thanks everybody.